Dave Rockow from Armageddon here, giving you an update on our 2014 Silverado with 200 and a bunch of miles on it, 200,000 and a bunch of miles on it. I'm here with Owen, our lead engineer, and we're gonna talk a little bit about what's going on with the truck. So we went and baselined the vehicle, making about 294 horsepower to the tires. Pretty good for an old worn out truck, but our intention was to get this thing over 500 horsepower. So how do we do that and how do we test that? The first thing we do is we strap it down to the dyno, take a reading at the wheels, log that for future use. Now you can see our peak torque was 325 foot-pounds of torque and we peaked out at 294 horsepower. But what happens when we put more than 10 pounds of boost on it? Well, we'd expect it to be well over the 500 horsepower range. On 10 pounds of boost, the Armageddon system will typically give more than 200 horsepower increase to the tires. Well, let's see what ours did. So we took our Silverado down to Mass Acceleration Motorsports, which is just down the street, and turns out one of the best tuners around, and got it on their dyno, tuned it up on 10 PSI, and it made 473 foot-pounds of torque and only 441 horsepower. Now, is there something wrong with the turbocharger, something wrong with the turbo system? The answer is none of that. Our old truck with a bunch of miles on it had a component fail, and this component actually ended up being the torque converter. So if we're looking at the dyno graph, you can see it goes into peak torque right at about 4,500 RPM. Let's look at the vehicle data log and find out what was happening there and where all this horsepower went. So using the HP Tuners software suite, we were able to get a HP log, and the guys over at Mass Acceleration sent that over to us so we could review what happened with the truck. Now remember, peak torque was at 4,500 RPM, and if we go to this data log here, you can see by the time we get to 4,500 RPM, this little red line shooting right up. That's not good. That means we're experiencing slip somewhere. And in this case, that slip is actually the torque converter. So the torque converter is supposed to lock the engine to the transmission, kind of like taking the place of a clutch, and works in a similar way. And as the RPMs go up, and especially when we get to peak torque, we want to see the input shaft RPM or the slip ratio be 0. It should be basically what the engine RPM is. And in this case, it's actually slipping more than 230 RPM. It's a pretty easy fix. What we're going to do is take out that worn out stock torque converter, and we're actually going to put in an OE torque converter from the Camaro ZL1. They are rated for a lot more torque, and it should allow us to put down the horsepower that we're expecting. Again, this truck's going to make over 500 horsepower on 10 pounds of boost when we get this patched up. So stay tuned, like and subscribe our channel, and we'll follow you along with every upgrade that we need to do to get our high mileage truck boosting.